So today we're gonna unravel all the secrets behind dry aged beef. Have you ever wondered why all the top steakhouses around the world are now pretty much exclusively using dry aged beef? Well, let's find out. And stick around because I'm gonna show you exactly how you can dry age beef at home at the end of this once we're finished here. Because not everyone has access to all these fancy dry ages like I do. Let's get stuck in. So first things first, what is dry aging? Well, it's not just leaving meat out to dry. Dry aging can be from anything from 24 days like we've got here, all the way up to, I did one at 200 days last year. I did a short on it. It'll be linked below. Go check that out if you want to. But hot tip, it wasn't great. It was way too far for me. So what's most important about dry aging is the temperature, the humidity, and the airflow. You got to get all those three things right to make sure that you dry age safely and effectively. Humans have actually been dry aging for millennia. Before refrigeration, some parts of the world where it was cool and windy, people would literally store their beef and all types of meat just by hanging them in dark sheds. So the wind and the temperature will be controlled by the natural environment, which is what we're trying to imitate here. Now let's get scientific. Well, as scientific as this chef can get. I am no food scientist. But dry aging, effectively, moisture evaporates from the muscle, creating greater concentration of beef flavor and taste. There's also a natural enzyme that breaks down the cellular walls of the meat molecules as well. That breaking down of the cell walls makes the beef way more tender, and the longer you do it, the more tender it gets. Oh, look at that. Oh. So why doesn't the beef spoil? Well, the outside of the meat hardens and it protects the inside muscles' bacteria from going crazy. Bacteria need moisture to survive. If you take that away from the equation, they simply can't survive any longer. Once the outside of the beef has hardened, molds do start taking over, which is why it's really important that you don't put anything else in the fridge that you're dry aging in. The molds are very similar to the penicillium type molds that you find in lots of cheeses, which is also why you find people that enjoy really ripe, stinky, strong cheeses also enjoy really long dry aged beef. So we've just cut this thing open. The first thing I always do is give it the sniff test. And it shouldn't smell strong. It should smell nice and clean and not very particular. That doesn't smell that much at all, to be perfectly honest. It just smells like nice beef. What I'm looking for is no blemishes, no real nasty dark spots. You want nice, rosy looking flesh here. This is a very young piece of dry age. This is like 24 days maximum, I think, which is way younger than I would ever normally pull it out, but I kind of wanted to show it, for the sake of this video. Don't worry, it will get eaten. You can see here, this is where the outside is dried up on the crust, which you can't leave on there. It's super tough. You've got to cut that off before you start to cook it. But I'm pretty happy with this piece. This is a piece of blue diamond. You can see it's still nice and rosy red. This isn't like a super high marble score piece of meat, but you can see it does have some really nice intramuscular fat. Delicious piece of beef that's only going to be made better by dry aging it. But let's cut a piece off and cook it and see what it actually tastes like. The big question, should you try dry aging beef at home? Well, first of all, that's delicious, by the way. It's only at 24 days of age. Doesn't taste really strong or anything at all. It's definitely very tender and got great beefy flavor. But let's talk about the pros of dry aging at home. Well, it's a lot cheaper, right? You're gonna lose about 25 to 30% in loss. So if you're buying dry aged beef, someone's going to charge you for that, whether it's the butcher or the processor, whoever's dry aging it. So you can take that cost on yourself. It's also way cheaper to buy big cuts of meat like that yourself than buying individual steaks. The other pro is that you can kind of start taking stuff to different lengths and playing around and seeing what you like. I know for me, I like my steaks at about 45 to 55 days. That's the sweet spot for me personally. And the negatives. Well, it costs a bit of money to set up. You're gonna have to buy a fridge, a little bar fridge or something like that. And a few other things that we'll run through in a minute. There's also the safety aspect of it. You've got to be careful when you're doing this stuff, right? Now, by all means, I'm going to show you how to do it, and if you want to do it at your own risk, go for it. I've never had an issue with it, but I do just want to caveat, I'm not a meat professional. I'm just repeating information that I've learned along the way working in this industry. So the safety you've got to be careful of, the space you've got to be careful of. You have to have somewhere where you can store a fridge and you can't let anyone else use it. It can't have anything else in it. You can't even put a slab of beer in it. You can't put anything else in this thing. You've got to make sure it's just there for dry aging beef. And if you're not scared away just yet, then let's head home and I'll show you how I set up a dry ager in my own home. Actually, it's not even in my own home. It's next to Mitch's desk, but that's the problem. Before we go, We're gonna get Mitch to taste this piece. We're gonna cook another piece, well, dry age another piece, and we'll see what you think of that in 30 more days.
What is it, 24?
That's 24.
It's delicious.
It's good, huh?
Yeah.
All right, remember that, because in 30 days I'm gonna ask you to do it again. Let's try this too. This is that Marble Score 9 Jade that's on the thumbnail. Jade's a pure blood Australian Wagyu product. This is as good as it gets, Marble Score 9. You can still see the intramuscular fat. Whew. I actually don't think I've ever eaten Marble Score 9 Plus. And Jade. Oh my good Lord. That's also had 24 days of age. And that's probably one of the best steaks I've eaten in my life. I'm not just saying that. Mitchell?
I'm pretty damn excited. Wow.
That's about as good as it gets.
It's like butter.
Oh, wow. I thought it was going to be too rich. It's not.
And you said you can't eat that whole thing. I'm like, I reckon I could eat that whole thing.
I reckon you could too.
Delicious, chef.
Anyway, back to work, Mitchell. I've got work to do. Oh, it's so good.
Wow,
All right, we just got back from the test kitchen and it's really hot here, so I changed into shorts. I wasn't wearing shorts in the kitchen. But this is the setup. This is what we've got. This is your average run-of-the-mill bar fridge. I've got a glass door one here. It doesn't have to have a glass door. It's just easier to see as stuff's happening inside. The other thing that is important though is the wire shelves. You don't want the flat glass shelves. That's super important. And you want to make sure it's clean. So ideally you buy a new one, which you quickly sanitize out. If you've got a bar fridge and you don't want to go and buy a new one, that's totally fine, but make sure you clean it really, really well. And then you want to have it somewhere that doesn't get super hot. So here in Queensland, I couldn't put this in my garage. It'd be in 40 degrees a couple of times a day, no problem at all. It makes it really hard for the fridge to keep temperature. So this one's actually in Mitch and Caleb's office. So let's talk about the setup. Bar fridge, cleaned out really well. What is necessary is airflow. So what we've got down here is a little USB fan that's just pushing air around the whole time. We've also got a humidity monitor. Now, this is just a pretty kind of cheap one from Bunnings. It's nothing crazy. Ideally, you want the humidity between 75 and 85% at all times. Now, those big fancy air dryers that I have at work, that does control the humidity and you can set it. This, you can't control it, but what you can do is monitor it. And then what I'm gonna do is monitor it throughout this whole process and see if it does kind of get out of that kind of 75 to 85%, and if it does, see if I can do stuff to combat it. I think you can put salt in there, which kind of helps. There's a few other tips and tricks, but let's just see if it holds that percentage. So temperature. So you want this fridge running between 2 and 4 degrees Celsius, which is like 35 to 39 degrees Fahrenheit. Really important, make sure you're between those parameters. And if anything, I'd stay on the lower side. So I like to run them at like 2.5 degrees. Anyway, let's get this meat ready and get it in the fridge. So this is what we're gonna dry age. This is a Carrara Wagyu Marble Score 8 to 9 strip loin. I prefer to do what we call short loins in the industry, but this is all I could get from the test kitchen. So what a short loin is effectively the sirloin on the bone, like we saw in the Jade one that we saw in the test kitchen. So this is just a sirloin. Now the reason I like to use the short loin is it's got a big bone which protects it and you get less wastage. So especially if you're in a butcher or a restaurant, you'll definitely choose short loins over sirloins. All I'm gonna do is take it out of the bag. This is one of the times that I do use gloves. I usually don't use gloves when I'm cooking, but we really wanna control the amount of bacteria on the outside of this meat. So I'm gonna use gloves and I'll just use them once and then they go in the bin. Same with paper towel. I'm gonna use paper towel because I don't wanna use tea towels or anything that has any other bacteria on there. Make sure my board's nice and clean and we're just gonna get this as dry as we can. Now the next predicament I have is that, as you've just seen, the fridge that I have, which is just your run-of-the-mill bar fridge, is not quite big enough to fit this in lengthways. There's two ways you can deal with that. You can chop it in half, then you're gonna lose a side of each of that, effectively. Or you can take the edges off, these edges, and just cook them as steaks. So that's the option we're gonna have, because then we're gonna have still a nice big piece. But it's something to be wary of if you do go to your butcher and order a short loin. Make sure it will fit in your fridge because you're not going to be able to cut through that easily. Most butchers have a bandsaw. They will be able to shrink that for you if you ask them. They'll be able to cut it down. But I do suggest that you buy meat that's in the packet that it comes from the abattoir in. If this is hanging in a butcher shop, you don't want to take this home and dry age it. And the reason being is you don't know what's happened to that piece of meat. You don't know how long it's been out. You don't know who's touched it. If it's come from the abattoir in a country like Australia or the US or anywhere where the cold chain supply is really good, you're pretty good to know that that piece of meat is going to be in a good position when you finish dry aging it. So all I'm going to do is take the face off each side of this, purely so it fits in the fridge. And I'll keep these 2 steaks and probably have them for dinner. Nice piece of meat there, stunning. All right, to our nice clean dry ager. So here goes the sirloin. Did I cut enough off? Oh, I did just. And then we got the rib, which has already got about 25 days on it. So there you go. We'll come back in, I think, when is this posting, Mitchell? 35 days?
35 days.
35 days. So we'll come, no, 37 days. So we'll pull this out and cut it a couple of days before we post this video, and we'll show you how it went. All right. This piece went in at 25 days and it's had another 30 days. And this has had 30 days from start to finish. I struggled to keep the humidity at that desired kind of percentage of like 75 to 85% the whole time. I struggled with it the whole time. I did things like put a glass of water in there. I put a wet sponge in there. I tried every trick I could find and I could not get that humidity to stay above 60%. And as the time went on, it keeps dropping. So I've never dry aged like this. I have no idea if this is gonna work or not. I have read some stuff that if it's too dry, that you basically just dry it out too fast. So let's see what happened. So this thing went in there 30 days ago. I'm gonna cut this right down the center and we'll see what it's like in the middle. The temperature definitely stayed fine. So I'm not concerned about it, but oh, it looks pretty good. The pellicle or the part that we have to cut off isn't that deep. Smells fresh. You know, I'd love to dive into some more about why you need that percentage higher. And I think if you're doing really longer dry age processes that, you know, you probably need it. But that looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. You can tell when dry age has gone wrong. If you see miscoloration, if it's going dark, if you've got air pockets, you'll smell it. You'll know straight away that that's not right. This looks perfectly fine. What I was really concerned about was that pellicle getting large. So the pellicle is what you have to cut off. You can kind of grind it and use it in burgers if you want to, you know, 15% or something, but that looks kind of okay. If anyone has any, you know, other solutions to, other than buying an actual dry ager to control that humidity, I'd love to know in the comments. But let's just have a look at this rib. So that had 25 days in my dry agers at work, and then it had another 30 days in my pretend dry ager downstairs. The other thing that happened when I was putting the water in there, which was keeping the humidity higher, is that the back of the fridge kept freezing over. So we keep having to defrost it. That looks pretty good too. Now, naturally the pellicle is a bit thicker on this piece because it's been dry aged for an extra kind of 30 days, but it smells good. I can't see any bacteria that I'm concerned about on the outside. I think we're in the clear. Anyway, I think it's time to cook some of this up. We'll get Mitch to have a taste. I'll have a taste too. And I'll give you my final thoughts and let you know whether I think it's worth dry aging at home. It's a good looking steak. So you see here, this is a great example of an air pocket. And unfortunately, you're gonna lose a part of that kind of, that's a tomahawk, or a ribeye bone in, I should say. But because of that big pocket there, I'm actually gonna take that bone off to try and salvage at least a ribeye steak from it. It's the other thing you gotta take into account when you're doing dry age, is that the wastage is pretty high, which is hence why these steaks are so expensive in restaurants. Now that was the end piece, but that's what we've ended up with, a very small ribeye steak. It smells fine, there's nothing wrong with that at all. Also worth mentioning, this is a Wagyu product. This is a much more expensive piece of beef. So I've let these rest for a while. Let's see what they came out like. Stunning, cooked nicely, delicious. Tender, nice beefy flavor. Nothing wrong with that at all. And then cut some of this up. So this is effectively, how long? 55 days, Mitch? Really good. We'll get Mitchell to come taste some too, because he tasted some last time. I'll be interested to see if you can see any difference, mate. Come on. Dun, 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 dun. Try that one.
Next one first.
Yeah. So that was the one that you tasted at 25 days last time, 55 days this time.
It's mighty good steak. Not a food connoisseur, that's probably not even the right term. Honestly, I'm not in this profession enough to tell the difference, but it is damn good.
Delicious.
Like,
Okay.
I would not be sad about that.
Take your piece of Wagyu and get out of here. You'll know.
Oh, that is good.
Yeah,
that is so good.
That is good. So for me, the extra time delivered a slightly more tender steak and a more flavorful steak. And it's not strong at all, it's not nutty, it just tastes beefier. So conclusion, after all that, should you dry age your own beef at home? The long story short is, if you want to do it as an exercise or a hobby, then go for it. Have a play with, see how you can get control of the humidity, because I could not master it. I think it has something to do with the fact that we are in Queensland right now. It has been summer and it has been excruciatingly hot, so the AC has been on the whole time, which I think is drying the whole house out, positively most of the time, negatively in this case. I could have changed that by putting the fridge in the garage that's not air conditioned, but the issue with that is that it's way hotter and that fridge would work very hard to keep it that kind of temperature that you're after. So should you dry age at home without a proper dry ager, a dedicated fridge that's designed to dry age? Sure, go for it. I don't see any reason why not. I feel like you probably don't want to take them to the extreme lengths that you do sometimes see people taking them to, because I feel like it's just going to dry out too much and you're going to form too much of a pellicle and have a huge amount of wastage. But should you buy dry aged beef? Absolutely. There's a reason top restaurants are doing this, and there's a reason that I love it and that lots of people like me love it. It intensifies flavor, makes it juicier, not necessarily juicier, but it definitely makes it a more tender steak. So try dry aged beef. If you can't afford a dedicated beef dry ager and you've got a fridge lying around at home, definitely try it with that. But the most important thing is making sure you've got that airflow. Make sure you put that little fan in there to keep that air. Anyway, it's probably a long video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you took something from it. Please let me know in your comments your experience with dry aging. If you've got any tips or tricks on how to control that humidity, and we'll see you next week for another video. Peace. You got some beef to eat, Mitch.